Hurricane Michael ripped through the Florida Panhandle 6 years ago. Mayor Margo Anderson's book reveals what really happened in Lynn Haven. 600 pages with actual FBI investigation memos and much more. The foreword is written by Guy Lewis, a Fox News contributor who oversaw all federal prosecutors under Attorney General John Ashcroft nearly 20 years ago. He represented James Finch, the longtime contractor hit with bogus charges so absurd that 2 juries rejected them. It didn't take long for the second jury to return a not guilty verdict. Margo's book is a journey of legal treachery that will shock the conscience of every American. Order your copy today of Hurricane Michael, Storm of Corruption at Amazon.com. Or you can pick up a copy in Lynn Haven at Victoria's Last Bite. Sponsored by my friend Ryan, the AC doctor, for all your air conditioning needs. Oh boy, so this is a continuation of the show that I did yesterday. And if you want to catch up, I'm going to try not to be too repetitive, although I am going to show you the eye-popping stuff. So you know about what you just saw, the 64 false charges against Mayor Margo Anderson in August of 2020 after she blew the whistle on FEMA fraud, and then Sheriff Ford teamed up with the FBI to throw the whistleblowers, her and James Finch, under the bus. Together, they were charged with 79 counts, all of which were bogus. And James Finch faced 2 juries over it ended up being 1 count of bribery that did not have a quid pro quo, that was simply a wink and a nod, known as a Section 666 bribery violation, that about 6 months ago, the Supreme Court said nobody can ever face a bullshit charge like that ever again. All right. So the person who had his hand in all of the cookie jars, or many of them, is still getting contracts today and was given immunity for committing a federal crime. And that is Chris Forehand, the city contracted engineer who owns Panhandle Engineering, and who James Finch is suing because what I can tell is it appears that Chris Forehand and city manager Vicky Gaynor conspired to pass a resolution in Lynn Haven where James Finch cannot compete for contracts, even though he is the most qualified, he's had the lowest bids and the best work, and DOT loves him. He has the highest pre-approval rating by far of anyone around. It's insane. But the story gets even more insane, because I showed you, and I'm going to show you right off the bat right now, that in 2021, Matt Gaetz, the New York Times accused Matt Gaetz essentially of sex trafficking a child, a minor, or something like that. And it ended up being all BS. The Justice Department never prosecuted Gaetz. Gaetz was exonerated. Gaetz wrote a letter about a month ago about this. It's unbelievable. But the person who is Chris Forehand's defense attorney used to be a prosecutor, okay? This is the guy that got the immunity deal for Chris Forehand, and Chris Forehand didn't even have to testify. In fact, he was going to plead the 5th at an evidentiary hearing. That's his defense attorney, David McGee. David McGee used to be a federal prosecutor in that office several years ago. He's now in private practice. Let me show you what Matt Gaetz said, again, if you haven't seen it. And then I'm going to show you that his attorney in 2021, David McGee, was named in an indictment because somebody actually went to prison for trying to extort Matt Gaetz's family, Don Gaetz, of $25 million to make the allegations go away. That's Chris Forehand's attorney, person A, in the indictment, and was never charged. He's powerful guy. And this is a very dangerous thing to tell you, is just the truth. But I want you to have a little bit more information about how such things could happen. Now, let me know in the comment section if you can see this, if you can hear this, because my worry is I stick my neck out to tell you the truth and not enough people hear it. So I'm willing to stick my neck out and try to carry this load. But I really need your help in liking, sharing, tagging friends, whatever it is. Support the show, whatever you can do. But I'm not certain that you can hear everything right, because the numbers just seem very, very low. I know I've been sort of shadow banned. Okay. Everything's okay. All right. I'll carry on. Carry on and hope for the best, but I'm going to tell you and show you the facts, the documents, the news stories that you've never seen, and it will begin to give you more context about the size and scope of the protection racket in the Florida Panhandle. All right. This was 3 years ago when Matt Gaetz was accused by the New York Times of underage sex or something. And he'll explain it here. And we know now that the Justice Department here leaked to the New York Times this story to prevent David McGee, Chris Forehand's defense attorney, person A in the indictment, from being implicated. I'll prove it. Here we go. This was 3 years ago.
It is a horrible allegation, and it is a lie. The New York Times is running a story that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, and that is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case. What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. On March 16th, my father got a text message demanding a meeting wherein a person demanded $25 million in exchange for making horrible sex trafficking allegations against me go away. Our family was so troubled by that, we went to the local FBI. And the FBI and the Department of Justice were so concerned about this attempted extortion of a member of Congress that they asked my dad to wear a wire, which he did with the former Department of Justice official. Tonight, I am demanding that the Department of Justice and the FBI release the audio recordings that were made under their supervision and at their direction, which will prove my innocence and that will show that these allegations aren't true. They're merely intended to try to bleed my family out of money. And this former Department of Justice official tomorrow was supposed to be contacted by my father so that specific instructions could be given regarding the wiring of $4.5 million as a down payment on this bribe. I don't think it's a coincidence that tonight, somehow, the New York Times is leaking this information, smearing me, and ruining the investigation that would likely result in one of the former colleagues of the current DOJ being brought to justice for trying to extort me and my family.
So who is this? Who is this former DOJ official that was supposed to receive instructions or a $4.5 million wire in an extortion attempt? Why? It was person A in the indictment that I'm going to show you. Chris Forehand's defense attorney, David McGee. Don't believe me, just watch.
So a couple of obvious questions that come to mind. And again, just to restate, this just happened. Don't have any other information beyond what we've already said and you have said. First of all, who is this Department of Justice former employee who's trying to extort the money from you, you say?
His name is David McGee. He was a top official in the leadership in the Northern District of Florida as a prosecutor. He currently works at the Beggs and Lane law firm. As a matter of fact, one of the recordings that was made at the FBI and Department of Justice request occurred at that law firm. And the money that was supposed to be paid today that would have shown even more evidence of David McGee's work in this extortion scheme, that was foiled by the New York Times story. And I believe that's why this horrible information and these terrible allegations have been used this evening.
Okay. Now, it's amazing, is it not? Let's see what I want to do. Okay, I'm going to do this. That's amazing. So let's take a look at what ended up happening. I'm going to give you more details about this story. This was, again, 3 years ago. This was in, I believe it was probably around, it was early 2021. All right, let's take a look at the Northwest Florida Daily News. This story is from November 24, 2021. Are you with me? I'll keep looking to see if you're with me. All right. Gaetz extortion scheme update. Court docs claim Alford lied about Iran hostage, Biden pardon. Okay. So I'm going to break this down for you and then we'll read it. So there was a businessman by the name of Steve Alford. He ended up being convicted and sentenced to prison for attempting to extort initially $25 million from Don Gaetz, who was the president of the Florida Senate a while back and is now again a member of the Florida Senate. And of course, Matt Gaetz has been tapped by President-elect Trump to be the U.S. Attorney General. So this story is very relevant, and I have to get you up to speed on it. So Alford's partner, the guy who went to prison, his partner in this scheme, according to the indictment, was David McGee, the former federal prosecutor of big, giant, organized crime, very powerful guy. And now attorney, a private attorney who was able to get full immunity on the world claim conspiracy that Chris Forehand was involved in. But Chris Forehand continues to get big, giant deals, and nobody gives a flip. But maybe it's because people don't know, and that's part of the reason I'm trying to share this story, so you see how big this whole thing really was. And this is only barely scratching the surface, to be honest with you. So let's take a look. A factual basis for a guilty plea document released. Again, this is November of 2021, with the news release announcing Stephen Alford's admission that he tried to extort money from the family of Congressman Matt Gaetz reveals new information about the scheme. See, there was a third guy. Alford pleaded guilty in one count. I know it was a plea, but you try to blow the whistle on FEMA fraud in Bay County, and Sheriff Ford and the FBI and this Justice Department, they wanted 1,000 years. Margot in prison for 1,000 years. You hear me? Everybody acts like this is normal. Court documents state that if he had gone to trial, prosecutors would have convinced the jury that he tried to extort $25 million from Matt Gaetz's father, former state Senate President Don Gaetz. Again, he just got reelected. He is back in the Florida Senate, Don Gaetz. And I'm going to tell you something. I know Don Gaetz. And Don Gaetz has been on my show many times back in the day. I would go and visit him. And I'll tell you, he is as smart as anybody. You think Matt Gaetz is smart? His dad? Whoo! You think Matt Gaetz can debate? His dad is the powerhouse who can debate and get things done. He's unbelievable. And if he hears about this, he'll know. We got into some, and Matt too, and we got into some pretty big disagreements. As a matter of fact, Don Gaetz didn't talk to me for a little while, but I bumped into him at a big event in Pensacola about 6 years ago, and he was very kind to me, and we've talked a couple of times since. By the way, Don Gaetz has a home on Beach Drive in Panama City where these crazy people in Panama City are trying to tear up the beautiful road and beach over there in Panama City. But anyway, so back to this. So that's who we're talking about here. All right. They told Don Gaetz, rather, that the money would be used to rescue a man being held hostage in Iran. This whole saga surrounding Margo Anderson and James Finch and the FEMA fraud in Lynn Haven and Bay County, all of it is so big you wouldn't believe it. These kind of stories are attached. Also, in return for the $25 million loan, which the would-be extortionist, this is the guy who ended up going to prison over it, Steve Alford. He was David McGee's partner in the scheme, according to the allegations, the indictment. It would have been which the would-be extortionist said would have been paid back from a reward offered for the safe return of Robert Levinson. This guy here, Alford, he promised he could secure a pardon from President Joe Biden. Chris Forehand's attorney partner, David McGee, and these guys, they got ties to President Biden. They said, well, you give us the $25 million and we'll talk Biden into giving you a pardon, Matt Gaetz, Congressman Gaetz, who remains at the time in 2021 the subject of a criminal investigation into allegations that include sex trafficking of a minor. Again, that Matt Gaetz was exonerated for, and it turned out to be an absolute hit piece on him that's being resurrected for obvious reasons. And these are the people who made these allegations. These people. The congressman, these people being the Justice Department. The congressman has not been charged and denies the allegations. The factual basis for the guilty plea document that this guy pled guilty states that the FBI originally interviewed Don Gaetz about his contact with Alford and another person identified only as person A.
Hand caught in the cookie jar? Sometimes bad habits continue even into adulthood. I'm El Saline, 850-215-0628. Let me help you.
Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777. All right, so Steve Alford, who went to prison, was working with person A. And Don Gaetz had received a text 4 days earlier from person A. Now, you heard the video say of Matt Gaetz when he went on Tucker Carlson, and he said that person was David McGee. All right. Wait till you see what the rest of this article says. So, according to the indictment and according to the court documents and according to Matt Gaetz, person A, David McGee, requested a meeting and a text message to Don Gaetz to discuss the current investigation against Matt. Let's discuss. So David McGee texts Don Gaetz, hey, let's discuss the current investigation. You know, I used to work at I used to be a federal prosecutor, very powerful guy, worked on organized crime. He was the top guy to go after organized crime, David McGee. And he's texting Don Gaetz, according to the story here, saying, hey, maybe I can work on this with you and help you out a little bit, that indictment that's about to be filed against your son. So when you ask yourself, how does Chris Forehand get immunity? I mean, he didn't even have to do anything. He just got immunity. And it's because I told you the protection racket was very, very big. So David McGee, person A, in the indictment that sent Stephen Alford there to prison, David McGee says, quote, in the text, I have a plan. Chris Forehand's attorney says, I have a plan that can make his future, Matt Gaetz' future legal and political problems go away. As long as we are not, as long as there's not nuclear annihilation in the World War III, that's probably more likely than not, in my opinion, because I don't think this transition can happen for these reasons. But if things go as they should go, I got a feeling that Matt Gaetz' problems have gone away because he didn't do it. He wasn't charged. There was no evidence, and he's been exonerated. But 3 years ago, though, Chris Forehand's attorney said, we got some pull, Don, we should probably talk. Quoting the text message that Chris Forehand's attorney sent to Don Gaetz. Don Gaetz, quote, last summer we located Robert Levinson in Iran and took 2 proof of life videos, but the U.S. government foiled our rescue attempts, said Chris Forehand's lawyer. In the text, the unidentified person that I'm telling you is David McGee, tells Gaetz that one chance remained to rescue Levinson, and quote, if you and Matt are willing to help us privately and clandestinely obtain the release of Robert Levinson, I will ensure that your son, Matt Gaetz, is on a plane that delivers Levinson to his family, thus making him the most sought-after public figure in the world, said David McGee in a text message to Don Gaetz. I mean, and Matt Gaetz is not identified by name in the text of the legal documents, but it was established. The unidentified person, David McGee, Chris Forehand's attorney, spoke to Don Gaetz in the text of his partner, this guy, Steve Alford. All right, of his partner later identified as Alford, who would see to it that Matt Gaetz would receive a presidential pardon. You give us $25 million, and then when Matt Gaetz, when we lock his ass up, he'll get a pardon from Biden, said Chris Forehand's attorney. Holy shnikes, man. Alford would later tell Don Gaetz that when he was in prison for a previous offense, he had kept his mouth shut and did not implicate people who are now very high up in government. See, this Alford guy, he's been to prison like 3 times since 2006. And he doesn't say anything, and he's got very powerful people. I cannot emphasize to you how dangerous this is. But it's important that you know all of this. All right, so he keeps his mouth shut, and he's got very powerful people. He was going to use what was owed to him by the current administration, said David McGee. And all that stuff that they owe him for not talking in prison, he's going to get Biden to pardon Matt Gaetz, said David McGee 3 years ago to Don Gaetz. Said David McGee 3 years ago in a text message to Don Gaetz. Alford told Don Gaetz that he had seen grand jury testimony. Let me make sure I got this right up here. Okay, so what I just told you was actually Alford himself, according to this news story. It was not David McGee. Alford would later tell Don Gaetz that when he was in prison, he kept his mouth shut, had very high people up in government, and the Biden administration was actually the guy that was in prison who said that, not David McGee. He was going to use what was owed to him by the current administration to pardon any investigation or to cease, the document said. Alford told Don Gaetz that he had seen grand jury testimony. How? How? Talked to 1 or 2 witnesses about the investigation of allegations against Matt Gaetz. So this Alford guy said, look, man, I got people in the I got federal prosecutors, or it's got to be. They're the ones that have the very secret grand jury testimony. And quote, the FBI would not be this far along and the Justice Department would not have a grand jury involved if some of the facts aren't lining up the way they're lining up. In other words, Matt Gaetz is in big trouble, Don. So it was in 2021. They are strong facts, the statement quoted Alford as telling Don Gaetz. I don't want to get into any discussion right now about who started this. If you fund this initial $5.5 million, I give you my word, says Steve Alford. I will sit down and I'll tell you everything. There he is. History of the Alford case. Gaetz family extortion attempt. Stephen Alford's sentencing gets postponed for 5th time. Man accused of attempting to extort millions from Gaetz pleads guilty. On and on. So the guy who went to prison, Alford, also told Don Gaetz, quote, the team that delivers Mr. Levinson to the president of the United States will strongly advocate that President Biden issue a presidential pardon or instruct the Department of Justice. Instruct the local prosecutor, the Department of Justice, the big justice, to terminate any and all investigations involving Matt Gaetz, the document said. The team has been assured by the president that he will strongly consider such matters because he considers the release of Robert Levinson a matter of national urgency. Yeah, like I'm sure Don Gaetz believed that. Alford even indicated to Don Gaetz that he would convince Levinson himself to advocate on Matt Gaetz's behalf. So these guys are all saying, the Justice Department's saying, hey, Matt Gaetz is in big trouble, boy. He's been doing all these terrible things. And you just give us $25 million so we can save this prisoner in Iran. And we've got such pull with Biden that Matt Gaetz will get a pardon. Don't worry about a thing. And then when David McGee was, the night before David McGee was supposed to implicate himself, the New York Times got a leak from the Justice Department and bailed out Chris Forehand's attorney, and he was never implicated that way. Confronted by FBI agents regarding the discussion with the elder Gaetz, Alford admitted that he had never received any assurances from the Biden administration regarding a pardon for Matt Gaetz. Alford replied that the statement was a lie, a factual basis, the document states. Alford's fraudulent scheme was thus making materially false promises to obtain millions of dollars from Don Gaetz, though Alford knew he could not guarantee a pardon for Matt Gaetz. The document also discusses a Pensacola-based attorney A. I wonder who a Pensacola-based attorney A could be, who Matt Gaetz has identified as David McGee. Wow. McGee has served as Alford's criminal defense attorney on at least 2 occasions. It says Don Gaetz discussed the $25 million arrangement with David McGee, and that David McGee had told him he didn't think the group was supposedly trying to rescue Levinson needed anywhere near the amount of money Alford was attempting to obtain. Alford would later go back to Gaetz and tell him the hostage rescue team had negotiated a deal by which Levinson could be freed for just $15 million. All right, you're not going for $25 million, Don Gaetz. Can we get 15? The document also states that David McGee told the elder Gaetz that he had heard rumors of an investigation into possible wrongdoing by Matt. So Chris Forehand's attorney was leaning on Don Gaetz, saying, give us $15 million. We'll do our best because, man, trouble's coming for Matt Gaetz. Woo, it's bad. It's bad. It was bad because it was false. How about that? So that's the latest. I might as well show you this clip one more time. Let's do it. I'll show you this clip one more time in case you hadn't seen it. This was 3 years ago on Tucker Carlson when Matt Gaetz went on Tucker Carlson after the Justice Department leaked to the New York Times these false allegations and lies. Unbelievable. All right. I'm going to play this clip that is just unbelievable right after this.
Don't let back pain. You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome.
All right. I want to tell you as well. I cannot believe the tip I got the day before yesterday. And the way I got this tip was because somebody booked a call with me and got my undivided attention for 30 minutes. And it was awesome. So if you've been trying to get my undivided attention, here is how you can assure that you can do that. If you go to calendly.com/Bernie Thompson, see that in the orange? Calendly.com/Bernie Thompson. You can book a 30-minute or a 60-minute call with me, and you will have my full undivided attention. And we can talk about whatever, whether it's, citizen journalism, how to get public records, what I take out in the woods. I'd love to talk about that stuff for a while. But anyway, calendly.com/Bernie Thompson is where you can see that. All right, let's take a look at this again. 3 years ago, the day those allegations came out by the New York Times that ended up being false, here's what went down on the Tucker Carlson show.
It is a horrible allegation, and it is a lie. The New York Times is running a story that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, and that is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case. What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. On March 16th, my father got a text message demanding a meeting wherein a person demanded $25 million in exchange for making horrible sex trafficking allegations against me go away. Our family was so troubled by that, we went to the local FBI. And the FBI and the Department of Justice were so concerned about this attempted extortion of a member of Congress that they asked my dad to wear a wire, which he did with the former Department of Justice official. Tonight, I am demanding that the Department of Justice and the FBI release the audio recordings that were made under their supervision and at their direction, which will prove my innocence and that will show that these allegations aren't true. They're merely intended to try to bleed my family out of money. And this former Department of Justice official tomorrow was supposed to be contacted by my father so that specific instructions could be given regarding the wiring of $4.5 million as a down payment on this bribe. I don't think it's a coincidence that tonight, somehow, the New York Times is leaking this information, smearing me, and ruining the investigation that would likely result in one of the former colleagues of the current DOJ being brought to justice for trying to extort me and my family.
Again, this is 3 years ago, this interview here. Okay, so who is this guy?
So a couple of obvious questions that come to mind. And again, just to restate, this just happened. Don't have any other information beyond what we've already said and you have said. First of all, who is this Department of Justice former employee who's trying to extort the money from you, you say?
His name is David McGee. He was a top official in the leadership in the Northern District of Florida as a prosecutor. He currently works at the Beggs and Lane law firm. As a matter of fact, one of the recordings that was made at the FBI and Department of Justice request occurred at that law firm. And the money that was supposed to be paid today that would have shown even more evidence of David McGee's work in this extortion scheme, that was foiled by the New York Times story. And I believe that's why this horrible information and these terrible allegations have been used this evening.
Wow. I'm going to show you one more thing that came out today, that the story came out today. Let's just get right to it. All right. So this is from a lawyer who has a show that I will watch every now and then on YouTube. His name is Robert Gaetz. And he covered, I think it was, today, his show covered this because, now that Matt Gaetz has been tapped by President-elect Trump to be the U.S. Attorney General, the smear campaign they just start saying these things again, right? So this is a letter with documentation from Matt Gaetz last month. And the letter that was read on Robert Gaetz's show today on YouTube covers that letter that Matt Gaetz wrote last month. And it talks about the very things that I just shared with you. So this is a show from today. Watch.
Now, the DOJ leaked false allegations about me to the New York Times. They investigated those claims rigorously, cajoled witnesses to conform to their narrative, and then ultimately knew they did not have a chargeable case. The DOJ did everything they could to get Gaetz. The very people who have lied to the ethics committee were also lying to them. On information and belief, so they're lying to the ethics committee and the DOJ, saying on information and belief, the DOJ investigated allegations regarding violations of the Mann Act, trafficking, child trafficking, obstruction, illegally owning a marijuana business. They investigated Gaetz for taking bribes, campaign finance violations, violations of the federal drug laws. None of these investigations, says Gaetz, resulted in charges against me, and with good reason. I am innocent. I believe the Biden Justice Department leaked to the New York Times in 2021 to impact the behavior and the testimony of witnesses. Now, my basis for this belief is a recording of Joel Greenberg from prison, wherein he claims the DOJ told him that the New York Times piece put him in a, quote, a golden position. A copy of this recording can be given to you if you want it. Now, I serve on the House Judiciary Committee, says Gaetz, and the Biden Justice Department loathes me. We know, because he's obliterated them in hearing after hearing. I ask the most penetrating questions of their top officials. I frequently embarrass them publicly. Attached as Exhibit E. The combination of the unnatural bias of the Biden DOJ against me, their leaking of false allegations about me, and their ultimate decision not to charge me, even though they hate my guts, is a clear exoneration, as is widely observed by others in Exhibit F.
All right, now here is where this paragraph coming up is where this show today by Robert Govey mentions what I just talked about.
Now, an additional basis for my claim of exoneration, this is Matt Gaetz, is the conviction and the criminal sentence of Stephen Alford, who attempted to shake down my family based on the very same false claims that the committee attempts to refurbish for political payback. Mr. Alford was working on this criminal scheme with former DOJ official David McGee. Suspiciously, the New York Times story published the night before Mr. McGee was to receive a 7-figure wire transfer from my family at the direction of and in cooperation with the FBI was to cement his. McGee was never charged. Wow.
That's Chris Forehand's a defense attorney. That's just, I mean, you wouldn't believe how big this is. That's just the tip of the iceberg. How big the corruption was against Margo Anderson, James Finch, and quite frankly, Antonius Barnes. Who benefited? Who had the pull for this protection racket? How much money was eventually stolen, misappropriated? We don't know. What else is going on? We don't know. But things are changing, and hopefully we find out. But when you ask yourself, Bernie, why do you keep saying that, Chris Forehand got federal immunity and that he committed some federal crime? Because he got federal immunity. Yeah, but, he wasn't convicted of anything. So therefore, he should still have the carve-outs for all the big contracts, and James Finch should never, ever have the opportunity ever. He doesn't need those contracts, by the way. The vast majority of Finch's wealth came outside of Lynn Haven. Boy, I tell you what, it's the craziest damn story ever. And what's weird is how it's sort of coming back into focus with Matt Gaetz being tapped as the next attorney general. You said, yeah, Bernie, but he'll never win confirmation. Maybe not. But that's really beside the point. What I try to stay focused on is telling you what actually happens. Whether or not people do the right thing, that's out of my control. All right, I think that's about all I want to share with you tonight. I do want to thank those of you who throw a tip in the tip jar at Patreon, at patreon.com/Bernie Thompson, where you can contribute as little as $5 a month. And boy, does it help all of you who do that. Thank you, patrons. It's called crowdfunding. It's anonymous. It's easy, and you can quit at any time. Patreon.com/Bernie Thompson. And of course, thank you to the Unknown Patriot for your support. And I'll be back soon with a lot more.